I'm Nick Westergaard, and this is On Brand, helping you tell your story. My guest this week is DJ Waldo. DJ Waldo is a freelance writer specializing in all things words. He's a father of 4, including twins, husband to 1, and an alum of the University of Michigan. DJ is a self-proclaimed Giphy master and hashtag addict. And astute listeners may remember that for 100 or so episodes in 2013, 2014, he was my co-host on my very first podcast, The Work Talk Show. We're going to get into all things Work Talk as we catch up on this reunion show coming up. But first...
Raise the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more to reach the professionals who are more likely to find your ad relevant. Plus, with 1 billion members on LinkedIn, that means you'll have access to 130 million decision makers and 10 million C-level executives. That's a lot of millions of the right people. Get started today and see how you can reach the right buyers with LinkedIn's enhanced targeting tools. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply.
This episode is brought to you by Global X. Since 2008, Global X ETFs has been committed to empowering investors with unexplored, intelligent solutions. Global X specializes in exchange-traded funds that offer exposure to the artificial intelligence ecosystem, including themes like data centers, robotics, semiconductors, and cloud computing. To learn more about Global X's entire suite of ETFs, from covered calls, fixed income, emerging markets, and more, visit globalxetfs.com.
It's the Work Talk Show, talking through how work gets done today with crazy smart guests and your hosts, DJ Waldo and Nick Westergaard. Let the Work Talk begin.
Nick Westergaard, it has been a minute, as the kids say.
I realize as I welcome you to this podcast that I have not had you on, and I've been doing this show for 500 and some episodes.
Well, you know what they always say, those first 500 are kind of your test ones, and then after that is really when you get into your stellar guests. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate you holding off until you've perfected this platform.
I really wanted to make sure I knew what I was doing. And I think we've had some fits and starts, but I think I'm comfortable sharing this with you. But in all seriousness, you being a master of all things writing, we shouldn't bury the lead that we have. I also feel like this is a spammy email subject line. We've resurrected the Work Talk Show, but that's only because the internet made it vanish on us.
Yes. We didn't pay our bills, as they say.
It was one of those things where I thought it was there, and then it wasn't, and to
be fair to us, 10 years ago, I think we were both in our 30s then, as we approach 50 now. But I think we just didn't think. I don't know. We just didn't pay for the hosting, and then it was gone. But it's back, which is really all that matters, right, Nick? It's all that matters.
Yeah, it is. And plus, I will blame a little bit the evolving technology of the podcast space and, just like where the episodes live and how hosting worked back then. And I'm trying to remember. I feel like Dropbox was involved in some capacity.
But I'm going to tell you something even more exciting, because I just learned, thanks to the last week tonight, that little blip they do at the very end, that's how I learned that Skype has now died.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Because at the end of that, I don't know if you know the end of the intro of that show, they do like something that's happening in the news. That's usually, whatever it is. And they did a little like Skype, and then it blew up. And so I had to Google, is Skype dead? And it turns out Skype is getting like weaved into Microsoft or something.
Right.
And the reason that's relevant, you're thinking like, what are you talking about right now?
No, I know why it's relevant.
We used to record these episodes on Skype. What is happening? Talk about different technology, right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to see you that mind-blowing detail. And you were talking about logging on just now because we record the show, this show in Zencastr, and I'm only a couple years into doing that. I think I was still using Skype. Gosh, I can't remember when, but it's been more of those 500 episodes of On Brand were recorded via Skype than Zencastr. So it looks like I moved just in time. But yeah, that's kind of, we always said we're lazy podcasters, and I continue to say that as you sat there politely while I read your bio, like we used to do for guests as well. But
I mean, I think we're smartless before smart. I mean, can we just acknowledge that? Like we were smartless before those guys got together because we were lazy. They are lazy.
Yes.
And they're about the same age as us. I would argue that we're funnier and wittier. But
I mean, I don't want to start. I don't want to start anything.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, you start something. Next thing I know, we're in a Twitter X Blue Sky war, and then they're asking us on their show, and then all of a sudden we're taking over their show. I mean, there's a lot that could happen that I think we just don't want to get into. If you know what I'm saying, I don't need to get into that battle with my idols and the guys I look up to in the podcasting space. I would never want to do that, like tagging them or something. That would be just wrong.
I was going to have you, but I forgot. I was going to have you do the whole camera thing, whatever they do with the reveal.
Yeah, yes, would have been fun. Would have been fun.
Alas, So I was thinking about, because you and I cross paths via text every now and then of memories and things coming up online, and we've talked about the Work Talk show, and kind of regretted that it had vanished, and I think it was about a week ago, you said, what if I told you that I have all of the aforementioned Skype recorded MP3 files that lived in Dropbox? And I'm like, great. But we let the website go. What about titles and descriptions? And you dropped the old Internet Wayback Machine link in there. And with those two pieces, I began the audiological excavation of the Work Talk show.
Amazing work. I mean, I tell you what, the smartless guys could not have done what you did. Let's just be very clear about that. What you did was AI couldn't have even done that. I think you did something beyond AI, beyond smartless, and I applaud you for it all.
Well, while we're giving fake pats on the back, we'll give a real one to our mutual friend and Work Talk show guest, Jason Falls, who since many things, decades of our lives and such have passed since we recorded the Work Talk show. But among the many things is that our mutual friend Falls has started the Marketing Podcast Network, which my show, the On Brand Podcast, is a part of. And it occurred to me, really, other than just the happenstance of, I found the episodes and we could get the titles, what really made that possible was having a place for that to live. So I thank Falls and the Marketing Podcast Network for that. And I guess, again, back to not burying the lead, is the important note that you can find all 100 or so episodes of the Work Talk Show on Apple, Spotify, or whatever your favorite platform may be, even YouTube. Tom Webster, guest number 1 and guest number 99, who is always after podcasters to make sure their content is on YouTube.
I love it all. And good callback on the number 1 and number 99. I would not have known that.
Well, it's not like I was sitting there on my couch watching TV and methodically uploading episodes and everything else. So we've jumped in assuming that folks know what the Work Talk Show is. Do you remember the story of starting the Work Talk Show? Take it away.
Honestly, it was, I think, I've said this all along, and maybe, I don't know, I think we were ahead of our time. And I know that feels like maybe a pretentious thing to say, but you have to remember this is 2013. And I mean, this is before AI. This is before COVID. This is before, generally people were working in a traditional work environment. People were sitting in an office and 9 to 5, 8 to 5, whatever timing you want to go with, right? People were going into an office, doing work, coming home, maybe pulling up their laptop again. But it wasn't like it is today where everybody's remote, right? I mean, I remember starting with you and I was like, even the fact that you're in Iowa, actually, I wasn't even in California. I didn't know where I was at the time. I was probably in Utah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Utah and then Southern. I mean, I've been everywhere, right? And the fact that we were able to record over Skype with just audio and talk about how we got work done, to me was fascinating. And I think, well, I've always said I think it would be fun to do it again, but we can get into that later. But if you want, but I just think that we had this idea that everybody gets work done differently. We interviewed marketing people mostly. Yeah. Yeah. We interviewed a lot of authors. Social media was a different space then. I mean, this was when it was maybe just Twitter and Facebook. There was no Instagram. There was no, all the other things. So I remember interviewing a guy. I don't know if you'll recall this. I can't remember his name, and I'm sure we could pull it up in the show notes, but he was in a cave in Spain.
Oh, yeah.
He was working in a cave in Spain. And the thought of that then 10 years ago was like, what do you mean working? How does he get internet? How does he, what's the technology he's using? And now if I were to say somebody's working on a boat in the middle of the Atlantic, you would say, well, that's cool. All right. Right.
Okay. Because the Work Talk Show is everywhere. Once again, that was Chris Taylor. And his episode was titled Working in a Cave, Literally.
Wow, we were really good on the titles back then, weren't we? I want to give that's you. I think you were the title guy. If I recall correctly, you were very good at that short title generation.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, Nick, like to me, that was so interesting. And I think, we had a lot of episodes where he interviewed authors. And I think to me, as somebody who since then really has been doing creative, I've done freelance writing, 4 years after that show ended, I started my freelance writing career full time. And everybody writes differently. Everybody creates content differently. Yeah. I remember we talked to, at the time, Jay Baer was just experimenting with audio, and he would transcribe his entire book. And then he would hire out people to kind of piece it together, and then he'd do the transition. So he'd just talk a book. And then we talked to somebody else, and this might have been Seth Godin, to name drop. No, it wasn't. It was, let me just keep on name dropping. How about that?
It was,
guy Kawasaki. No, but it was somebody, and you might remember the name, who wrote everything out by hand.
That was Daniel Coyle, author of the book, The Talent Code.
Gosh, you have a memory of a lizard? Elephant?
I think it's elephants.
He's got the good memory.
I think we'll go with that. That's really funny that neither of us are remembering what animal can remember things. Well, it's
you
funny.
can remember Daniel Coyle, which is crazy too.
Again, I have the unfair advantage of like looking at every episode title and one paragraph description about a week ago. So,
but Nick, he wrote out entire books by hand. Like what? Like mind blowing. Right.
Yeah.
And just to me, that was the thing that was so interesting about the Work Talk show is that, and we interviewed a couple who traveled together. And I remember thinking like, wait, you and your partner can work together and not want to kill each other. I don't know what they're doing these days. probably a good look back.
Should follow up on that.
I haven't heard of them on Dateline. We do listen to a lot of Dateline. I wonder if anything happened. But I thought we had some really, really great conversations with people, and I don't know, to toot our own horn for a second. I can feel it again, Nick, which gives me great excitement and energy. I just think we figured out early on how to have a good rapport from 2,500 miles away, which is not typical, right?
No, that's a really good point too. And you talking about the authors that we talked to, and I really think for those 100 episodes, we really had a master class in productivity, working from home, all sorts of things that people don't really like. Here's how you do X, Y, and Z. And more than there's a right and a wrong way, I think back to how many different things from those 100 episodes that I pulled in and was able to do. We talked to Dan Rome, who wrote the book Back of the Napkin. I don't know if you remember a book about kind of sketch ideas and so forth. And he talked about, because we were real into apps too. We'd ask people for like the 3 apps that they can't live without.
Yes.
And he gave us a fake out and said, I have a really killer app that helps me get more work done than anything else. And he said, it's mornings. Because he would get, and not just like, oh, it's 9 a.m., I'm going to sit down and work. He was getting up at 4 a.m., but with kids, which we can both identify with, if you do get up early, then you can bank a couple of hours of productivity and not have anyone take it from you. So I know after we did the show, I wrote my 2 books and used a lot of those different hacks that we talked about. I would get up early morning. We also talked, more name dropping, to Daniel Pink.
Yes, I got a funny Daniel Pink story when we get to it. Yeah.
Okay, well, I was just going to say, because he was the one that introduced us to, I think it was like an hour late, or not an hour, a word count. Like he would go out, he would start the day, but he would, and now it's funny because he's all about like this, science of motivation and incentivizing oneself. But for him, it was like the reward of looking at ESPN.com that he didn't give himself until he'd hit his 500 words.
Yeah. And I think I remember him saying sometimes those 5 or whatever the number was, like sometimes it would take him, and it didn't matter what it was, right? It was like, I'm just going to get something down, because there was times, and you know this as a content creator, sometimes you can write 500 words in 10 minutes, right? Sometimes at 500 words, it's like you feel like your brain's going to explode, and every type, finger on the keyboard, you feel like it's just painstaking.
Yeah.
So I ran into him at Joe Paluzzi conference probably 4 years ago. And at that time, he was then wrong word choice, TJ. He changed from Daniel. He was either changed from Daniel to Dan or Dan to Daniel. But I remember whatever we called him on the show, he was now the opposite. Does that make sense?
Oh, okay.
If you have the notes, I'm just curious if he was Daniel Pink or Dan. But I remember running into him, and he either was Daniel and is now Dan, or vice versa. But I was like so excited to meet him, and I had the awkward moment of like, oh my God, do you remember you were on our podcast? And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, like this guy's now sold best-selling author, remembers the Work Talk show from 7 years ago. And he's either a really good liar, which is possible, or he remembered our episode.
That's
And we
amazing.
had a moment of bonding.
No, I ran into him at South by Southwest a few years ago. I've talked with him a couple of times since, and I've had him on this podcast. But and I'm trying. I can't remember what happened first. But he blurbed "Get Scrappy," so I've got a. Now I'm overthinking what to call him, so I'm just going to go with Pink.
But a nice guy. I would say also, Nick, all these people that we interviewed, to me, the one common theme is all of them were easily accessible and approachable. I will never forget, you said at one point, we got to get Seth Godin. I think he had just written Icarus or something, or I'm making that up maybe. But he had just written a new book, and I was like, dude, like, what do you mean we're going to – well, and you were like, let's just email him. And I was like, what do you mean email him? I mean, and again, this was a different time. We could have tweeted at him, or we could have but like there weren't as many channels to get in touch with somebody. So we're like, let's email him. And I will never forget, he emailed back, and we were like, well, I don't know if you were, but I was like, wait, what? Because like he was, and it still is like that.
Well,
legendary in some ways, right in the marketing space.
And I don't know if he still does this, but he used to, and I did this too, and I'm sure you probably did also. But I put my email address in books, and I think he did that in one of his in the early days. And I emailed him. I emailed him before I was even working from home, when I still had a job in corporate marketing, and I was probably trying to do my own purple cow thing, and was meeting some headwinds, and asked him for advice, and he responded there as well. So that, I think, is where my let's just email him came in.
Yeah. And I just think everybody, I just remember every conversation we had with people. I never felt like we were pulling information out of them. People were talking free flow, talking about, again, how they got work done, and everybody had a little bit of a different story to tell. And I want to go back to something you said earlier that I thought is really interesting, and something that I've been trying to harp on lately. I'm trying to do more videos on LinkedIn and all this stuff. And part of what I'm talking about, though, is like, I'm all for best practice. I love best practices. I love, somebody telling me how they did this and the hack to that. And it just all comes down to that you have to do what's best for you. And this isn't I'm not saying anything that's brand new and earth shattering. I mean, we said it 10 years ago, and we're saying it again today. But I do think it's really important that you try as many different things you can in whatever capacity, whether it's writing or doing something creative, and finding the thing that is best for you. Everybody works differently. You mentioned somebody gets up early at 4 a.m. So I just did this video. I don't know when this will publish, but I did this video in early March of me walking down the street. And I was talking about how I have found that for me, when I walk, I started walking this year without any technology. And it's a 30-minute walk, and my mind, it's like I have got this rejuvenated energy in the afternoon, where I have always been, I can get a ton of stuff done between 7 a.m. and noon. And then it's like I eat lunch, and then I kind of fall off. I go on this walk, and I come back, and my mind is like clear. It's like a free healthy drug, if you will. But that doesn't work for everybody, right? Not everybody can go on a walk, whether it's because they physically can't, or they're in an environment where they're in an office space where they can't just get up. But trying those different things, I think that's what we learned. And, I'm not saying anything new again, but we learned that from 100 episodes of the Work Talk Show, that everybody approaches work differently. And everybody we talked to was experimenting with what worked best for them at that time.
Oh, gosh, yeah. And as you say that, I'm remembering just so many things that I've been able to incorporate into my work, and thinking about I think it was John Michael Morgan, who was on a couple of times, branding author. And he had like I think it was either 2 hours or 90 minutes or something that was like, this is like and then when that timer goes off, I'm going to get up, and I'm going to, kind of to your point, walk away or move around or not be right here. Because I know for me personally, I am someone, and I have the neck pain to prove it. When I get locked in, I will stay there. And oh gosh, the sun's going down, and I've been back here all day.
But Nick, remember too, though, these were times where we didn't have devices to tell us. Like I have this Oura Ring now that every so often is like, hey, you should stretch your legs. I mean, your Apple Watch does, or whatever device you have tells you to get up. Like this guy, John Michael Morgan, 3 names. He would just set an old school timer, right? An egg timer or on his microwave or something.
Yeah, it was. I do remember it was an old school timer like that. And Dory Clark, who we talked with, talked about.
I love Dory.
She's great. She is great. Talked about batching tasks. And I still use that one because for me, granted, we're recording this on a Thursday, but this is special. For me, Fridays are podcast days. Those are days when there aren't a lot of meetings, things are winding down, and for me, it fits my rhythm because I like making things. I like recording and talking to people, so I'm usually batching those tasks of content creation on Fridays and a little bit on Thursday too.
Yeah. No, I mean, I know you went through and have seen these names, but your recall on some of the content that they create is amazing. And I think that's actually a testament to the guests we had on and what they said, because I haven't heard that name Dory Clark in 7 years. And yet I can remember the word. I remember that conversation. I remember talking to Chris Brogan and Amber Naslund and Anne Hanley was probably on several times. And we had so many. I mean, this is before, Nick, this is before these people that we talked to, a lot of them, like it was early in their career. I mean, I think Jay, when we spoke, had just written his first book and now he's on like 10 or who knows what. Jay, I mean,
Yeah.
Like this is before Convince and Convert, and now Convince and Convert is like, it's come and gone, right? I mean, just the nostalgia for me, I don't know if our guests are finding the same nostalgia. But
On Brand, we'll be right back after this.
Brace the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more to reach the professionals who are more likely to find your ad relevant. Plus, with 1 billion members on LinkedIn, that means you'll have access to 130 million decision makers and 10 million C-level executives. That's a lot of millions of the right people. Get started today and see how you can reach the right buyers with LinkedIn's enhanced targeting tools. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply.
This episode is brought to you by Audi. The road is calling. Embrace the thrill of the drive with the all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron. Featuring effortless power, serious acceleration, and advanced Audi tech. It's not just a new EV, it's a new way to experience driving. The all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron is here. The next chapter of Audi starts now.
Now, back to the show. You know, it makes me think of that question that I asked you earlier about starting the show, because I remember it was in the other, the kind of podcasting renaissance of the mid 2000s. And, we'd both done hilarious because, I don't feel like blogging is as much of a thing as it used to be, but we'd both done that. And we're thinking about podcasting. Jay had a show. There was
Chris Penn, OG.
Yeah. Marketing Over Coffee. There were so many. And so we were talking about it. We had a good rapport. But I remember us kind of consciously thinking, gosh, there's a lot of good marketing podcasts already.
Yeah.
I don't know. I would feel very intimidated to plant a flag there. And I don't remember how we came to it, but it's like, what if instead of asking them about marketing, which they're talking about everywhere, doing everywhere, what if instead we ask them how they get that done? And to me, I kind of geek out about the creative path that led there of, I think a really, like we've continued to say, a fruitful show that
Yeah.
produced some good conversations.
Imagine, Nick, in your spare time, which you have none, you have said, but I'm putting it out into the universe again, publicly for all that are listening. Imagine if we went okay, so your kids are a little bit older, Nick, but my youngest are fourth grade twins, and they have watched Fuller House. This is my best analogy I can give. They watch Fuller House, and for those who don't know, that is the Full House 20 years later, or whatever it is, right?
Yeah,
and it's
yeah,
the
yeah.
same characters, and they're now parents. And then they went back and watched Full House.
Oh.
Coincidentally, ironically, whatever the word is, one of the main characters is also named DJ. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Yes. And wouldn't it be interesting if we were to interview Chris Brogan again? What has he been doing over the last 10 years? What if Jason Fall, Ann Handley, all these amazing people, Seth Godin, Dan/Daniel Pink, maybe at this point he's John Pink for all I know. It would be interesting, and I will leave it at that because you have given me several hard no's in the past to doing this because you have 100 balls in the air. But if you were to put 101st ball in the air, maybe, just maybe.
Maybe just well, I was going, we'll keep up this hypothetical because I was going to ask you just as an interview question. We've talked about so many different people that we would that we talk to. Who would you beyond revisiting guests and catching up, who would you that in the 10 plus years since we did this before, who do you find that you're like, I wonder how you do what you do?
That is a wonderful question. The person I always come back to, and I've always been impressed with the amount of work this person gets done. And this is somebody we did have on the show. And then I want to give you another person that has not been on the show. But the first person to me would be Chris Penn. I've always been, and Chris, in full disclosure, if I need to disclose, was my boss at one point. He gets so much done, and he's all about efficiency and hacks. And what I love about Chris is he's always been the guy that will ship without it necessarily being perfect. He is never concerned about perfection. I always refer to myself as a recovering perfectionist, so I still have a little bit of that in me. But he just ships, and the reality is his 95% is 100 times better than anybody else's 100%. And so it's just, and I think for him, it comes off because of that. It's so authentic. It's not, he was authentic before authentic was a cool thing to be. And I'm constantly fascinated by, he can pull together a presentation, an hour-long presentation, and stand in front of people and just talk with no notes. Wow. He can, pull up a video and just the amount of work that he produces in the same amount of hours that everybody else has in the world has always been impressive to me. That's my first.
Okay, who's your second?
Well, that's my so I should say past guest.
Past guest. Future guest.
Past guest. Future guest, I actually think it would be really interesting to interview other podcasters.
Oh.
Because I think the process of podcasting obviously has changed and evolved over the years. You and I had it pretty dialed in. Obviously, we started using Jess Ostroff at one point to help manage that. Something tells me she's still helping you manage.
No,
maybe not. Oh, okay. But she helped us for a while, but we really had a pretty light load. I mean, I remember we would get it. I did GarageBand. We had an intro and an outro. I would pop in. We did light editing in the middle. But I'm curious, some of these teams, like I listen to The Daily all the time. I mean, I'm amazed that they can pump out that amount of content every day. But they have a team of probably dozens, if not more, people that help them. So I'm just fascinated about people that podcast regularly, or even a weekly show like Ezra Klein I listen to. Like, that's so dense. And like, what does his day look like? How do you consume all of that content? And these are, I'm giving you sort of news shows too, but it doesn't have to be. But how do you consume all that content, internalize it, come up with your own take on what you think is interesting, and then spit it back in a cohesive way that is a storytelling, interesting, consumable piece of content? Does that make sense? I love that idea that people can just do that. And it seems easy. And yet you and I know from being on it's not easy, right?
Right.
But I'm curious how people get that done.
Yeah. Yeah. And like what the routines and how they've simplified it over time for themselves also. It's funny because in the Work Talk Show days, we talked a little bit about the division of labor, but the great thing about having a co-host when you were new to podcasting is we split it pretty evenly down the middle. I did the descriptions, the titles, the website of it. You edited the audio. But then at the end of that 100, and I was going to start On Brand, I didn't know anything. So it is funny because I did 100 episodes, but I had no audio experience.
That's so funny. I never thought about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That was, I had to catch up a little bit and learn how to do stuff. I would, if I was going to interview someone, I am probably a little late to the party here, but I just read Cal Newport's Digital Minimalism. And I know from you and I talking about it, when we talk about working, the double-edged sword of these things here.
Yes.
And that's kind of, I'd say, over the past year become my real challenge. And so I am trying to be more mindful. And that book was really good. So also, someone I'd love to talk to, and a book recommendation. Anything that you've read about how work gets done or productivity, things like we used to talk about that you've read recently?
Yeah. So I'm embarrassed to say I haven't read this book, but I've done a lot of reading and listening to the author who wrote this book. Does that count somewhat?
Yeah, I think so.
I think you'll probably know this one. Chris Hayes, MSNBC Chris Hayes, wrote a book. I don't know if the title is Attention or something about attention. And basically talking about, in fact, that's how I got this idea. It wasn't novel to go on 30-minute walks without technology. It's something he does. And he talks a lot, his basic premise is that's the new economy is not information, it's attention. And perfect example of attention is if you are listening to this podcast episode right now, we have your attention. How do we keep your attention? Well, hopefully you have another episode after this that's interesting, right? But you're constantly making a decision between, I can't listen. There's 100 podcasts I'd love to listen. There's my TV is sitting right there. My phone is right here. There's so many things that are craving your attention. And what Chris talked about, Chris, my buddy Chris, Hayes, what he talks about is that it used to be when you were, you could go back to when there was ABC, CBS, and NBC, you'd have a choice between 3 stations. Now TV is unlimited, but it's not even TV anymore. Now you've got Netflix and Hulu and Paramount, all these other things. And that's just television. Now you've got all sorts of other media. You've got podcasts and AM and FM. And his big thing is, and I'm holding up my phone again, is that you have every piece of content that has ever been created in the world in your pocket.
Yeah.
And his point is, I hope I'm interpreting his point correctly, is you are vying for attention from this device that is sitting there that at any point is distracting you to say, I want to learn about this. I want to learn about that. What's happening right now? What's happening in the world? What's happening locally? What's happening with my dog? My kids are at school right now texting. We're going to dinner tonight. My wife is playing. All those things are taking your attention. And you, as a human, there's two sides, obviously. There's the marketer side who's trying to get your attention. And then there's the consumer side, the individual or the brand, whatever you want to call it, that is trying to figure out, where should I spend my time right now? Since we've been on this call recording, my screen's popping up with text about this. Can you send an email about the Little League? Where are we going for dinner? What time? All the things that are happening in the world. And like you, I'm probably trying to minimize this and this distraction. But at the same time, it's real. They're fighting for my attention. And I guarantee you, somebody that's listening to this podcast right now is listening while on a walk, while watching TV, while putting their kid to bed. It's a real thing. It's from a brand marketing standpoint, it's hugely important to understand it. And from a personal side, I think it's hugely important to understand how to not let it be all consuming.
Yeah. Well said. And and that is you and your buddy Chris are onto something there. Well, you brought up brands, so it has now reached.
That's called a segue, Nick. Come
on,
that was
segue.
intentional. Come on,
see,
we used to be great at the segues.
I know. Segue alert. So, what is a brand that has made you smile recently, DJ Waldo?
So the brand I'm going to use is called Boulevard. I am guessing most of your listeners have not heard of it. Boulevard is I guess you would call it a scheduling app for mostly people in the style industry, stylists, so barbers, massage therapists, med spas. What I like about it is there's a couple things. Actually, the thing I like about it the most is they have a chat bot, just like anybody else would, arguably. Number one, the chatbot is probably the smartest on-site chatbot I've ever used. I would say 90% of the time I can get my information from the chatbot. So I don't even go. I used to go online and type in Boulevard, how to do this, right? And I would be an article. The chatbot just tells me now. So the efficiency piece is amazing. But at the end of it, always says, does this answer your question? Would you like to connect with a live person? Every person I've connected with there is just absolutely fabulous and human, and I can joke with, and I send animated GIFs to. Remember, self-proclaimed Giphy master.
Yes.
I sometimes send hashtags as a hashtag addict. And I just don't think you get that enough. I think the one of the challenges with these chatbots is you get frustrated with the chatbot because at some point they can't answer your question. And most companies will just end it there because for them it's like, well, we can cover 90%. And when the ones we can't, we don't need to hire somebody. This team at Boulevard has hired people that are, I don't know. I don't know if they're young, they're old. I don't know. But they also, I mean, I've done pop culture references. Like I said, do you need any more? Is there anything else I can help you with? And my answer is negative Ghost Rider. And then I realized that the person on the other end might be in their 20s and might not know what it is. But I love brands that are just human. Like they have true humans on the other side and not this faux human of a just a bot that you can interact with. So Boulevard is the brand that makes me smile. And I'm even smiling talking about Boulevard. So Boulevard.
That is a good sign. So where can folks go to learn more about who you are and what you do?
Oh, wonderful question. Have you asked that before?
I have. I yes. I'm into the can part. It's the boilerplate.
I am leaning into LinkedIn, like probably many marketers. I'm really leaning into LinkedIn, and so DJ WALDOW. I don't know. Is it /in/whatever? Pretty straightforward. That's where I am. That's where I'm trying to showcase more and more content and be more authentic and human. And I mean, it's kind of the only way I know how to do it, but that's the best way to find me. And then, oh my God, I could leave my email address, right?
You sure could.
Are people still doing that?
Be like Seth Godin.
Be like Seth Godin. Well, the nice part with a name like DJ, first name, last name Waldo, is it's just DJ Waldo everywhere. But don't forget that hanging W on the end, W-A-L-D-O-W.
Not like Where's Waldo, who is
Exactly.
only with one W.
Right.
All right. Well, we will link up to all of that in our show notes, which folks can find at onbrandpodcast.com. DJ Waldo, thanks for being on brand with us.
Thank you, Nick.
On Brand is part of the Marketing Podcast Network. If you like what you're hearing, if we've made you smile, you can always listen free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite platform may be. And please take a moment and rate and review the podcast to help others find the show. Until next week, I'm Nick Westergaard, and I'll see you on the internet.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.